Everybody. So if you've ever partaken in a Conscious You event, we always start with a little dance in the beginning just to get the juices flowing and also wait. Oh, Mark, you just put me on mute. Was that for a reason?
Oh, I was trying to invite someone into the room and your name popped up. Sorry.
Okay, see, this is how you're treated here. Fantastic. Well, it's wonderful to see all of you, or at least see you in principle. Some of you with video right now, some of you don't. Maybe as we're starting this, if you could just post in the chat where you're dialing in from, just so that we have an idea who's with us today, that would be fantastic. So I am located in Berlin. We have Argentina, Lisbon, Cleveland, Ohio, France, Reutlingen, Frankfurt, Berlin, Munich, Augsburg, Berlin, Switzerland, Berlin, Cologne, fantastic, Quebec, ooh, early start. Fantastic. Okay, so we have Cannes, France, Ostritum. Okay, don't know where that is, Tom. So maybe as we're getting ready for this, Mark, shall I make a few announcements, or can you? I don't know how busy you are with letting people in. I can take that over and then you can make the announcements about recording and cameras and all of that.
Sounds good.
So you go ahead.
Yeah. When the talk begins, we ask you to turn off your cameras and microphones, obviously. If you want to only view the speakers, you can then click on one of the disabled little screens from the videos, and you'll see 3 little dots at the top right. And there's a button that says Hide Non-Video Participants, and that will take all the little disabled videos off your screen and only leave the speakers. If you're on a tablet or mobile, you can swipe to the left, and that should have the same effect if your screen is large enough. We are also going to be recording the call, so if you feel uncomfortable being recorded generally, leave your video off. We will also disable chat during the talk itself, but re-enable it later for discussion and Q&A. If for whatever reason you're unable to unmute yourself or turn your video back on, I might have disabled it because you didn't disable it. And then you just need to write me in chat real quick saying, hey, I need my voice or my video back on, and then I'll enable that for you. And I think that's all.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so if you could all turn off your cameras now, that would be fantastic. I'm starting the recording here. And before we get started, let me start with a quick introduction of myself for those of you who don't know me. So I'm Nadezhda Taranchevsky, or Nadia in short. I'm co-founder of Conscious You, and we are specialized in facilitating what we call collective transformations through our scalable online coaching programs. And one of these programs, which is what ultimately brought me to run the Money Talk series, is the program that I co-wrote with Peter Koenig about money, called See You Money. I've been fascinated with this topic ever since I first met Peter about 15 years ago, because I was, for one, fascinated with the process that Peter developed, but also the bigger vision behind it, which is to support people to do what they love with and without money, and also help businesses to shift their perspective from the bottom line of business just being money to the bottom line of business being love. And so as part of See You Money and this whole universe that we've created around money, the Money Talk series has really the intention to start a wider conversation about all things money, especially for people like I was in the past who don't necessarily enjoy speaking about money, because I think a lot of the change makers that I know feel rather uncomfortable. So the setup for today is, in a moment, I will introduce our 2 wonderful speakers who you can already see on your screen. Then I will have an interview with both of these speakers for about 20-25 minutes. During that segment, as Mark just shared, the chat is closed so that we can all be fully present with our guests, especially me, so that I don't have to constantly shift my focus to the chat. But then we will reopen the chat for audience questions and, of course, also give you the opportunity to just ask them live. So that's the setup of our time today. And so as I'm going into introducing our two panelists, I always think about what connects the speakers that I have invited. In this case, I would say that they have both tackled a holy cow in business, which is the question of how do we pay people in organizations for the work that they do. And of course, as we all know, traditionally, that payment is linked to your position in a hierarchy, or in some organizations for how long you've been part of the system. And they've both went a different path and created something new together with their teams. And we're going to dive into that. So it is my great pleasure, Joana, to have you back here. Joana Breidenbach was already on one of our money talks, and she, as the founder of betterplace and betterplace Lab, went through a deep process within her team around money and salary. And now, once a year, the team members of betterplace Lab determine their own salaries together. And we will, of course, hear all about that. And my second guest is Sebastian Koshy, who is the HR manager and change consultant at Decathlon Belgium. And Sebastian has been working for Decathlon or with Decathlon for 15 years. And as part of this role, also specialized by reinventing for the past 4 years how Decathlon pays salaries, how this process of remuneration actually works, and moving it towards a self-deciding system. And given that Decathlon is quite a large organization, I'm also in particular interested, of course, how that plays out in a system that is way beyond the startup phase, and to see where are the differences and where are similarities for organizations of different sizes. So welcome to both of you. And as you both know, I sent you in front or before our panel today a few questions, which I'm going to just quickly post into the chat, which are a bit more personal about your story. And I'm always asking my guests to answer these or similar questions just for us to get a chance to get to know them as a person. So Joana, if you could speak first, maybe just quickly about these three questions and anything else that you want to say as an introduction for yourself.
Oh no. Okay, now I got the permission. Okay, thanks. Yeah, it was not so easy for me to think about to come up with a coherent answer to your questions, Nadia, because I feel I grew up with a lot of confusion around money. You know, my mother said, you know, it's impolite to talk about money. You have money, you don't talk about it. At the same time, I could see that my dad was working very hard to provide us with, you know, an affluent, comfortable life. So I certainly learned that, you know, you have to work a lot for money. That was certainly a message I received. But I also received the message that, you know, really as a woman, Joana, you know, you just choose what you want. You know, you won't really have to earn your living. You know, you'll get a nice husband. So that was also some priming. So, you know, there was a lot of confusion really about and the importance of money. But it's certainly when I decided to move into a career, and for me it was, you know, not a question that I wanted to, you know, have my own path and shape my own life and contribute and also make money. And the money thing really was never in the forefront. So it was always something which I thought, okay, it's a means to an end, but I never considered a career just in order to make money. Yeah, it was always something, I always had quite a bit of intrinsic motivation to change something in our society. And at the same time, I also knew that I wanted a certain standard of living. So I was in that way also lucky, or maybe I chose it wisely, because, you know, for the first time when I was starting my career and when we had 2 small children, my husband actually was providing for us as a family. And I really started quite late in life to earn proper money, because I decided to do anthropology, do lots of research in that field, and write books, which, you know, sold, but they didn't really provide me with a very comfortable living. So for me, money has never been a very important subject. And maybe, you know, talking to you more about it, I would, you know, move back or retract that statement. But I always felt that really what gives me most joy in life is if I am in connection with something which is really meaningful to me. And that has always been my driving force in life, to go for what I find really interesting and important. And I think that's also, you know, your last question, what is the dream you have for the world? I mean, I do feel that right now we live historically very unique in a time where salary jobs are so important. And I think we are going to move out of it, you know, because we are going to have a new economic system where I love that, what you earlier said, where the bottom line is love, where I feel, and I don't know whether it's going to be universal basic income or whatever, but I do hope that we are going to provide a setting for people where they can follow much more what is meaningful to them, and where money is some kind of cause of energy. And so I don't want to negate that. At the same time, where not so many people make meaningless jobs, which they are emotionally completely disengaged from, just because they have to earn a living.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think that's a wonderful vision, and probably one, Sebastian, that you can resonate with as well. So I'd love to hear a bit of an introduction to you about these questions.
Yeah, thank you. Hello. What did I learn about money? I learned that money is really deeply and complex subject. When I met Peter, I didn't know where I go, and it was a surprise for me to discover the subject of money. I thought that it was a mental topic, and I thought that I discover a new methodology for my teams, and and I remember Peter when he asked me, are you sure to do money work in your company? And I said, yeah, I'm sure. And I didn't know what it will be. It's really a subject of personal development. I think if each person has a personal a field, a different field about the money, and in a big company like Decathlon, it's difficult to speak about it, because we are 2,500, sorry, and during the journey, I understand that if you want to be good with this topic, you must have a clear frame. With no frame, it's a lot of people are anxious, stressed, hungry,
Sebastian, let me stop you for a moment here, because I think to really get the full story, let's actually start at the beginning, because I understand that the money work and the process you've been through in terms of the salary system is, of course, part of a bigger transformation, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So maybe you give us a little bit of context from where Decathlon started and the different stages you went through until you then hit the topic of salary and money.
Yeah, Decathlon is a company who wants to responsibilize maximum its teammates, and since 4 years we do a transformation because the world changed, and we have to be more agile, and we change a lot of things since 4 years. And at the beginning of this change, I was a store leader. I was in the retail, and when I was store leader, I can decide about everything. With my store, I did 20 million euro of turnover each year. and I can decide of a lot of things. But one thing, there was one thing that I can't decide. It was the salary of my teammates. I can give a proposition, but I can't decide. And for me, it was a great frustration that I can decide about everything and not about the salary of my teammates, because I'm someone who are really responsible. I need some questions, I need some challenge, but I can't decide. And after that, I change my role and I go to HR, and I take this topic to change the process. And since 4 years, I experiment the process, and each year we grow up together in this process, and it was not every day easy.
Yeah. So let me pause you here for a moment, because I would then also like to hear how Joana started the process in her organization, because it's a very different sized organization. But maybe just to close a loop there in terms of knowledge, when we first talked, Sebastian, you also told me that a big starting point was really moving or being moved by what you read in Frédéric Laloux's book, which many of the people on the call here know, and Joana is very familiar with, and sort of his look at reinventing organizations, right? And realizing that there are already organizations out there who run on different principles, that self-organization is actually a future that is possible, including for larger organizations. And then for you personally, to experience this frustration of there's a lot of freedom you had as a store manager, but then there were areas where you just couldn't go because it was corporate policy. There were systems in place that you didn't have the right to change. Yeah. Okay, so that is a good summary. Thank you. Joana, what was the starting point for you, and how big is betterplace Lab, if you can give us some orientation? You're still muted. Oh.
Yep. Okay. betterplace in total, we have 80 employees, but in the betterplace Lab, the think tank in which we work very differently, radically self-organized, we are currently 16 team members. And we also were very inspired, as you said, by Laloux. I think I read it just when it was kind of off the press, hot off the press, spring, summer 2014. And at that time, I was thinking of phasing myself out as, the founder and as basically, the boss of the team. And I didn't know how to do it. And so this Laloux provided a huge inspiration for us to organize our team as, everybody is a boss, and to try to create what we call a competency-based hierarchy, which is very fluid. And so when we decided to follow Laloux's case studies, because he doesn't really tell us how to do this, so we had to come up with our own ideas and how we could actually redesign all the different tasks which were with me as the boss, solving conflicts, raising money, hiring people, negotiating salaries. For all of these processes and structures, we looked in the team, we said, okay, how can we do this differently? So we really crowdsourced, talked to other people, read a lot online, especially we had a small working group of how could we in the future determine our salaries. And we came up, at that time, there were not so many experiments. I really feel that now, this has changed quite a bit, and there's much more talk about new pay now than there was 6 years ago. But we really felt that we wanted to do full transparency and that we really wanted to do it in a radical way, which was to negotiate salaries once a year amongst us team members, because we felt that we wanted to be involved as a whole team in the budget process and the planning process for the next year. And we tied that together with and maybe we're going to talk more about the how we did it, and we tied that to our salary negotiations. And so for the past 6 years, we've now every year in autumn the whole team comes together and we have a certain process of how we negotiate salaries.
Great. So, you know, for me listening, it of course feels very different to think of a team of 16. And I think, okay, yeah, I can see how that works, right? When I think of an organization of 2,500, I go, how does that work? Right. So, Sebastian, I would love to hear a bit more before we get into the money debate of what is the structure now that you have, I assume, co-created with Decathlon in order to even have these conversations about money, because it's not done centrally anymore, right? So how are you organized now?
Yeah. With a little group, we did some workshop to create this process, and the goal was to create a frame for the country, but a frame inside that the store leader can play, and each person lives with the money differently, and we want to respect each person, and the responsibility of accountability is at the store leader, and the responsibility of the store leader is to be the HR of his teammates, and in this job he must decide the increase of the salary. This is his responsibility. But if it's good for us, he can let decide his teammates if they aren't so young, if they have a lot of experience, if he can let decide his team with the process, and it's the first step. If I am the store leader, will I let decide in my store? The second step, if I am the teammates,
do I want this?
Yeah. It's a really good question, because it's really difficult to decide. Some people can't decide. I learned it. I was surprised about it, but we are a great company. We must be efficient, and it's not the goal to be to less efficient. And I can not decide if I want. And in this case, my store leader decide for me. And
okay, so just to be clear, so that means within Decathlon, basically the functional teams are every store site, and then the store leader who's managing that particular site is also the person who then begins the dialogue about, firstly, am I ready as a store leader to move into this process, and then to have a dialogue with everybody in the store to see, are you ready to move into this process collectively? And that's when it starts.
Yeah, because in this type of transformation, everybody go to his speed, and I can't decide for everybody.
Yeah, but then does that mean when, you know, let's say I'm managing a store and I feel actually I would be really excited about introducing this conversation, but then let's say 60% of my store go, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to have my salary and that's it, and I don't want to deal with any of these questions. Then what happens then?
I can valorize my teammates if I want. We have a frame with each year we evaluate performance, impact, and the profile. And with this frame, you can play as a leader, and you can discuss with the teammates, and to have an idea. For 2,000 people, we have each year about 200, 250 increase of salary. It's not a great proportion. We have an increase of 1% of our salary mass each year. We have a legal, I can say it, a legal frame for 1.1% each year.
But so then that means if I'm the store leader, I can even make individual decisions for every person in my team.
Yeah.
So if you, as my team member, say, I don't want to have anything to do with this money conversation, then I make the decision as the store leader. And if Joana says, I would love to have this conversation, then she becomes part of the bigger dialogue around setting her own salary.
Yeah, and with the HR team, we challenge each store leaders of its decision. We ask question, how do you do in your store? And we accompany each store leaders in the process to ask the good questions.
Mm-hmm. And how many people within the overall group of 2,500 are now in the self-setting of their salary in this process?
Last year, here we are now in the process for 2020. The last year we had 260 increase, and I think that 130 people has decided himself.
Okay.
And, it's important to know that if I want to decide himself, I do an advice process. Frédéric Laloux speak about it in this book. I must do an advice process if I want to decide himself. It's a great principle in our company. If I want to decide something, I must do an advice process. Okay. And we find this advice process of the team.
So Joana, I see you nodding to the advice process. Is that something that you deploy as well within BetterPlace Lab?
Yeah, we do it. I mean, not with regards to salaries. There we do have very intensive feedback from peers to peer, but we also have the advisory process when people are making decisions of a certain reach and involving a certain amount of money. Also, that we also found to be really very useful. And but also important that the person who seeks advice doesn't necessarily have to follow that, but he or she just gathers information and then the decision is still made autonomously.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Joana, I would be fascinated to hear a bit more. What are sort of the questions that came up as you were engaging in this process? Because I'm sure there was a lot of, it must raise a lot of tension because it's so unusual. What did you encounter there?
Yeah, I mean, so I think maybe I just briefly describe the process because, it is actually the negotiation of salaries in our company is very much tied into the whole other DNA of how we self-organize, because we really rely, because there is no boss. So we really rely on very good, precise and open feedback and honest feedback. Because there's nobody who, for example, could tell somebody else to leave the company. This is, somebody leaves the company if there is dense enough feedback that this person is not fitting into the company. And so what we have found that once a year, as I said, in autumn, we always have these feedback rounds, and everybody who has worked together with a colleague in the past year gives that colleague feedback. Like one, informal, just maybe writing on one page, and how they perceived him, what they really valued, where they see weaknesses, what are their expectations, whether these expectations have been met or not. So everybody receives a handful of feedback from his colleagues in written form, and then on the basis of that makes his own salary pitch. And in that salary pitch, we have a few criteria which we as a team have established, what are legitimate criteria in our salary pitch. So of course it is, how much do I contribute actually for the financial well-being, for the team well-being, how much do I support my teammates, how much, but also we also found it was a valid reason if you have, for example, just gotten another child and if you just need more money for your lifestyle, or if you have brought in a lot of money through a really good acquisition of a project. So we have about maybe 6 or 7 criteria from which people can choose, and not everybody chooses, you know, it's a flexible system. Some people will only invoke some of these criteria and not others. Then we do have a public pitch where people then pitch their salary and say what they are committing themselves to do in the next year, what kind of responsibilities to take on. And then following that, there is a challenge to that. You know, maybe people agree. And of course, first of all, it is really important that the whole team knows what the budget is going to be like, because, you know, I mean, you can come up with, you know, fantasy salaries, but, you know, it needs to be in relation, of course, to your income. And that for us is always, you know, we are a nonprofit, so our salaries are in our planning is we never have in the beginning of the year, we never have all of the money on board. We constantly have to just there's always a delta, yeah. And so it is a question for people how high they want to pitch their salary, because they know then they will have to acquire more customers. They know it is really their responsibility, and then, you know, so then there's this round of challenges where people will say, listen, you know, if we take all of your propositions together, we will need, I don't know, maybe, you know, 500,000 more euros in our budget. And then, you know, so this is this is always an approach of how big the salaries can be and how much money we have in total. Usually it is interesting, because we actually see that some people get feedback from their peers, no, you should ask for more money, you know, because you have contributed so much and you're just a very modest person. But also others get challenged, and other people will hear, listen, you know, last year you didn't contribute as much and I was disappointed by what you brought in the team. And so that is of course, it is a very, you know, many people are at a very vulnerable spot there, and people really need, and that was our basic learning, know that, you know, you need so much inner competencies and inner clarity, and also, you know, assertiveness and also listening skills in order to be able to lead a fruitful, non-violent discussion about this topic, because many people do attach money, you know, the height of the salary, the size of the salary, to how much they are worth as a human being. And so, you know, we learned a lot about how do we communicate with each other, how can we have conflicts but still stay in relation and not hurt the other person, but nevertheless be frank and honest, because, you know, that's what we need. Because if everybody wants too much money and everybody is just in a way shying away from confronting that and challenging that, then everybody's going to be unhappy. So a lot of inner work needed in order to have these conversations in a fruitful and meaningful way.
So I have a lot more questions about the inner work part, but just one last question to this process. How long does this then take until 16 people have sort of done this alignment process?
Actually, I mean, we did when the first round we did calculated how much it cost us, and I'm as I said, I'm not that good with numbers. So I mean, it was not an insignificant amount of money which we spent, just the pure hours, you know, we spent on it. But we've become better with the years, and you know, so there are 2 feedback rounds and a pitch, and if all goes well, then that's it. So, you know, it's a few days in every employees' working life, and it has been proven, you know, it's much more than salary negotiations, of course, you know, because it is really the clarity of who are we in the team, who has which competencies. There's so much more clarification going on and self-awareness of who are we as the team, and maybe what other, you know, competencies do we need to get on board. I mean, so it is much more than just the salaries. It really is a process for the company becoming aware of itself in many ways, seeing itself from the outside, seeing how the different parts are interconnected and how team members collaborate, and so, you know, it's not just it's, you know, you can't just equate it with, you know, a certain sum of money.
It's more than money. And Sebastian, I see you nodding wildly, so link that to your own experience. If you I
made the same question in Decathlon.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about the process in Decathlon. Like how does it work there? If somebody says, I want to set my own salary, then is it a collective process? Is it a one-on-one process? How is it organized?
Each year, in January, we have the end year interview. Me with my boss, with my leader, I have my interview, and I explain my year and my results, my project, and in function of the discussion, I ask. Is it a good question to speak about my remuneration? And at the end, if the process begin, I do my advice process, and we close the processes global in Belgium the 1st March. The whole process during 2 months because it take a long time with the number of the teammates, but the process for me it's really short. I have my interview, and if I do my advice process, I prepare it. I met the 3 or 4 person, and it takes 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour 30, and the discussion is really great in the all of case. Maybe there is a lot of great feedback. There is like Joana, we speak finally for a lot of things, and a little bit about money. Money is the end of the discussions, and all the rest is really important for the team spirit, for the feedback culture. For me, it's the best of the process.
It's the deep conversation. Yeah. And so, Sebastian, that means if, let's say I was a team member in Decathlon who wanted to have the salary process, then I would get my advice process set up. So I would have 4 or 5 people with whom I would share my number. Yeah,
3 or 4 people who are impacted by my job, who a pair, a teammates, a leader. It depends of my role, and I must choose people who can challenge me. And you must. The transparency is about the person who choose. We have a document. You must scribe in this. I choose Joana because and Joana can explain his feeling in this document. There is no transparency about the money, but there is transparency about the person and about the feedback. And it's a really rich moment, and everybody can see the feedback in this document.
Okay, fantastic. And actually, I was going to ask then, in the end, is there a place where everybody can see what everybody else earns, or how do you set benchmarks in this process?
At the end of the process, the payroll team record all the data, and we look and we discover the number of the increase and and in function we in 2 years we have so big increase, and it was not good. We had a bad year, and for me it was not okay. And we share the information in all the country. I say for me it's not good. We had a bad year with bad results. And for me, it was not good. And I say it at all the leaders. And I say, in 2 weeks, you must change or copy. I don't know how, but it's not okay for me. Okay. And I cross my finger. was good. 1 week after, it was good. And I have a lot of message, a lot of mail with feedback. It was a great moment, but it was not the two best week in my career. and today I have a lot. I trust in people. If they have the information, if the process is clear.
Yeah. So I was going to say that sounds to me like the connecting thread also between the two approaches that you've taken, because Joana, you just shared, people know the budget. So everybody knows sort of what we are playing with. And if we go way beyond the budget we anticipate, then one question is either how do we lower it or how do we increase our budget? And what's my part in increasing the budget? And Sebastian, what I heard you say is the moment you became transparent about this is what the bigger picture looks like, people then began to self-adjust in a way in this frame because they knew why. Yeah. So before we turn it over to our audience, maybe one last question about the importance of sort of inner work, a degree of consciousness or maturity. I would love to hear sort of how you both feel, how much of that is needed for people to be able to go through these processes. And maybe Joana, you first.
Yeah, in my experience, quite a bit is needed, because we learned that we live in a culture where it's so, we want to be nice. We want to support each other. It's pretty hard to critique. We are used that bosses give, their employees that they are critics and they say what hasn't worked. But if you start from the peer-to-peer relationship, if you then criticize somebody, and if you really are also really honest, and and there's so much stuff normally in a company where people have these water cooler conversations, where they talk about their colleagues behind their back, because we are just not open about stuff. Yeah, and also people are not open about their own insecurities and maybe feelings of shame or anxiety, also around the topic of self-worth. I mean, so many people are just so have so many negative sentences in their head about what am I worth, and that if we don't address that head on, and if we don't have a discussion which makes all of these implicit things which go on in our head explicit, and if we then learn, wow, my colleague feels the same, and I always thought he or she was so super confident, but he's actually also afraid to to speak truth to power or whatever. And so we really learned that we needed to go through a process which was supported by a coach, where we learned to articulate ourselves really in a very different way, and where we also learned to get to know each other, or ourselves first of all best, because very often, I mean, I didn't really know, what motivates me, what do I need in order to feel secure, what do I need in order to, be creative. I mean, there were so many self-reflection questions about myself, which I didn't really have a clear answer to, because I was so directed, from the outside. Oh, other people think I'm doing fine. Well, then I'm doing fine. Maybe not, and so we really learned, a new language. We learned new concepts of how we can speak to each other about this, and just show up also with much more vulnerability, much more, as Lalou, says, as a whole person. But this was not something which we could do just by pressing a button. This was a process which really took time. Some people found it easier than others to be, really fully themselves, or more fully themselves. And with others, we constantly had to support them in really going for their self-worth and really claiming the kind of, money also we thought they deserved. So a lot of introspection, and a lot of self-reflection, and a lot of meta-reflection, because we also looked at the team dynamics of how are we as a team actually dealing in all of that. And so in order to really create this safe space where you dared to tell a colleague, listen, I think, this, you are earning too much, I think you should earn, I don't know, 400 euro less every month. That takes courage, and really skills, you know.
Yeah.
It is a skill to because I have learned in my family of origin that if I have a conflict, the relation breaks. Yeah, so that was dangerous in a way, and I had to relearn that you can have a really, really good conflict but still be related to the other person.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, again, I can also see how, of course, the beautiful situation that with some sort of smaller startup, the way betterplace Lab is organized, you're already pulling a specific type of person into your system in the first place, probably with slightly higher self-reflection competencies than sort of the norm, right? And then even though for those people, it's still a deep process to get to that place where they're comfortable having these conversations, because they really do go to the core. And Sebastian, I would be curious just quickly from you, the inner work aspect in a system where there were a lot of long-standing employees probably who've never done a whole lot of inner work, I would assume, or not in the majority of them. How is that integrated into your approach?
It's very difficult to have some different conscience level in the same company. But for me, the key is to let the choice. Don't replace a rule by another rule. For me, I understand that because the rule for me are violence and if you change a rule for another rules, you have the same violence. And for me, it's not good. And the choice is the key. And if you can go at your speed, for me, it's okay. You must go. It's the parti pris. I don't know if you say that in English. You must go, but you go at your speed, and it's the key.
Yeah. So in a way, the sort of the deep collective reflection process that Joana can do in an organization like betterplace Lab, I understand in Decathlon is somewhat replaced or eased by just giving people the choice to move into that system if and when they're ready, knowing that that is sort of the future of the organization. That's where things are heading, but you don't need to be the first one who jumps on the train. Yeah. Okay. So listen, I would now love to open the conversation to the larger group, because I'm sure there are loads of interesting questions. And for that, I would invite all of you to open your videos again, because it's, of course, always nicer to talk to people who have a face. And then at the very bottom of your screen, there is a reaction button that you can push, and you can raise your virtual hand, which makes it easier. And while people are turning on their videos, and hi, Peter, it's lovely to see your video here as one of the first ones. Actually, why don't you give a short statement about what you heard, since the money work was an integral part, at least, of Sebastian's process into this?
Thank you, Nadia. Well, I loved hearing both stories, but of course I know Decathlon's a bit, but Joanna, I just loved her hearing what you were saying. It was like honey to my soul. The way you have just invented and done this by yourself, and what you're doing with your people. It's a perfect model of what you've done and what you are doing for me. I couldn't add any more beauty to it than what you have expressed. So deeply grateful. What I would
Thank you.
also
And
say,
I would just
Yeah.
I would like to make one amend, because I feel, now it's not about me. I mean, that's the interesting thing, because this is really the team's process, and I don't play a role in it anymore. I mean, maybe I was, there was Lalou, then I was maybe the inspiration for, but this whole process really has taken place without me. I mean, or, just me as.
No, we won't allow that. You are the source, Joanna.
Joanna, you're getting yourself into deep trouble with.
You get yourself into deep trouble with that. Yes. I would also just mention that it's even more complex than seven criteria in a family. I mean, I just took my book out because I couldn't remember which lie it is with me. Lie number my 25th chapter, if you like. I identified 14 criteria. So, trying to get to what is a just salary, you can't do it with your head, actually. You have to sort of do it certainly with the body as well, because you've got to got to integrate so much information all in one go. That's why this whole union, you know, fair pay and, you know, it can't possibly work. You have to go into a process like you're doing, but you need that level of consciousness.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Peter, what you just said, I want to link that to something that I recently read about. There's an article somewhere, I can't remember where it was, about an organization in the UK that they employ therapists and sort of deploy therapists on the larger scale in the UK market. And they had come up with this notion of we're going to change everything and we're going to make it really fair so everybody is paid the same. And then they failed miserably with this process, right? Because of course, what we realized once we go into these processes, fairness does not actually mean that everybody gets the same. Because of what you just shared, Peter, the variables that we have to look at, the complexity of a life situation and of a contribution to a shared project or a shared organization is, yeah, there are so many variables to consider, and it can't be everybody makes the same and then expect that people are happy with that. And
the variables are dynamic, they're changing with people's life situations. So yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of running processes like this.
Yeah, and there's another variable, because, you know, I mean, when we work with public sector organizations or with ministries, for example, you know, they set our daily rates. So we have another fixed, you know, we have to pay this employee who works on that project a specific amount of money. And I mean, all of these inside criteria, that's really very complex.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to ask you one question that was posted in the chat on YouTube. So I'm just going to read it out. I would love to ask, salary is very often an indirect way to give feedback for the performance of the other. About the doing, how do you also include the being? And with the being, I mean qualities like balance, creativity, love, cheerfulness, humor, calmness. So who has a sort of gut response to that? How do you include the being in such a process as a salary process? Joana? Yeah.
No, Sebastian, maybe you go ahead. I mean, I can say something about it, but yeah.
In the interview, we check the performance, the impact about the role, and the profile. And in the profile, we have savoir-être, and it's the being, and it depends of my comportment, it depends of my values, it depends, and with this three dimension, we can check everything. Yeah, for us, it's okay like this.
So the reason for being is one of the components that is calculated into this whole thought process or dialogue process. And Joana?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it is also an important criteria of who is this person in our team, you know, because we are not only looking, I mean, okay, if you are a great salesperson, if you've brought in millions of euros into our company, that's wonderful. But we have I think, a refined awareness of what it takes to be a good company and what it takes to be a good team. And there are also maybe not so sexy jobs, and also aspects of, you know, somebody who is very supportive, who is caring, somebody who notices if a colleague is struggling, and these are also qualities which we, you know, speak about and which we value and which we then also put into this calculation, you know, and so I feel it is really important to have that, because otherwise you just get, you know, mental performance maniacs, but you lose the glue of, you know, what keeps an organization together, and that is very much emotional availability and other so-called soft skills. And, you know, I think it is important that we don't put them to the side and say, oh, these are soft skills, you know, these are not as important. I believe that in the digital age, actually, they're going to be much, much more important, because many of the hard skilled work we will have, you know, automation. These will be done, lots of things will be done by machines. And so we really need a whole human being to supply all the other things which are so important.
Mm-hmm. And actually, that would be an interesting conversation as well, as how does this tie into the future of work, right? When we're entering an age now where fewer and fewer people will actually be needed in order to perform the tasks that will need to get performed, what happens to everybody else, and how do we pay these people to, or how do they make a living in terms of, how do they eat? How do they feed their children? How do they pay rent? And what you just said, Joana,
yeah, I mean, we already now have so much unpaid work. No, I mean, we have the whole domestic sphere, which is unpaid. We have the whole caring for elderly people. We have the whole civic engagement. I mean, there's, the way how we think about the salaried and the non-salaried world is really very arbitrary. And I mean, I think it's high time that we have a more, focused discussion about this and a more, conscious discussion.
Absolutely. So I would love to hear who has questions for our panelists. So you can, if you don't want to be seen, you can type them into the chat. You can raise your electronic hand, or you can unmute yourselves and just start talking. As I'm waiting for some of the questions to maybe bubble up, one of the big dreams that I have is, as I shared with you, based on Peter's work around money and projections, I've created this program with him, the See You Money program, that really takes people quite deeply into the self-reflection process around what is my money background, where have I come from, what is the baggage that I have learned to carry at home, what are the beliefs around money, and how do those tie in with the beliefs that I have ultimately about myself, right? And which is where this whole what you already talked about, questions of shame, downplaying my own worth, all of these things bubble up in this realm. And one of the dreams I have is to actually do that within an organization. But I'm also realizing that the topics it raises are so close to the bone, so close to the core. It takes already quite an advanced level of consciousness for an organization to hold that kind of a conversation in a bigger realm. So Peter, I would be interested, besides Decathlon, have there been other organizations where you have started doing this type of work?
Yes, but not many. And they tend to be more like associations and non-profits in that kind of sector than companies, actually. They tend to be at least interested first, even if not more conscious. I think interested because very often they think they're not interested in money, but need money. So they think that getting somebody in to do a money seminar will help them to get more money. Fundraising.
Little do they know, right?
Yeah. They don't know what they're inviting in, of course.
But to that point, Peter, I would actually love to ask Joana, because you work also in a quite particular field, and maybe you can, I think we forgot that in the beginning, to say a bit more about what does Betterplace Lab even do, and then I have a question that follows there.
Yeah, I mean, so we are in this, hybrid realm of social entrepreneurship. So we are a nonprofit, but we have our own business model. We don't rely on donations, and we have over the years developed a model by which we can support ourselves. But we don't have, we don't have to worry about shareholder reimbursement, for example, which is a huge, benefit, because I can see that these kinds of negotiations would be so much harder in a company where, a vast amount of the annual profits is being siphoned off to, people with bank accounts in the Caymans, to be just a bit more, stereotypical. I mean, we only have to earn as much money as we, use up. And I mean, of course, we do like a bit of a surplus, but in general, we don't have shareholders, or our shareholders want meaning in return and not money in return.
Mm-hmm. And my follow-up question to that would be, in the social sector, what I've often seen, and that's also what Peter was just speaking to, there's often a very particular relationship with money, which is sort of focused around, I acknowledge that somehow it's important, but actually I don't want to deal with it. And how much is that the experience that you have made with this particular sector as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in the social entrepreneurship sector, it is a bit different, because people are aware of business models. There is a very good reason why they don't want to be like, many of the other nonprofits. At the same time, I think you are completely right. People there is a certain self-selection. People do like to go to the nonprofit sector because they feel it's not as competitive. I mean, little do they know, because it's highly competitive. The fight for resources is huge, and that is really sad, because it really prohibits collaboration between actors, which really should get systemic solutions into the world, and they don't know how to collaborate properly in many cases. There is a certain, it is also amazing. I mean, I sometimes get asked, betterplace, I mean, with the other part of our company is the Germany's largest crowdfunding platform for social projects. So we have a turnover of millions of euros every year, and some people actually think, because we are a civil society organization, that we only work with volunteers. I mean, so the misconception about civil society organizations is just huge. I mean, we have a whole team of developers, we have a whole team for marketing. So I find that is also a very stereotypical view of the outside world, that they think, oh, but if you have a meaningful job, you should be happy to have a meaningful job. You also really want money, and you even want to be paid well. I mean, and so that's really very harmful, because people think, if you do something you enjoy, then you should be earning less. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. If you are contributing to the greater good, and if you are contributing to a world which might be a bit more healthy socially or environmentally, you should be earning more than the kind of people who you fuck up our world, and who often get paid very well.
Absolutely.
So there's a whole, it's really a muddy waters in that. What are civil society organizations? What is the role of social innovation and all of that? I mean, it's really, it's work in progress.
Well, there's a lot of education to be done, for sure, right? And I think, wouldn't that be an amazing future if actually the more meaningful your work and the more you love what you do, the more you earn? That would be the future that I want to be a part of. Yeah. And Sebastian, I would also like to hear from you in terms of resistance to this path that Decathlon is now on. Have a lot of people left the organization? Like, what did that create in your workforce? And you are still muted.
In Belgium, we took a lot of time with personal development and with accompanyment, with coaching, and each leader was accompanied to grow up in this transformation. But some leaders don't want, because they like power, they like hierarchy, they like something that the company can give today, and the rules change, and it's like this, and we lost some people, but not
too many.
Not too many, yeah. And the difference for me, it's the culture. We don't do advertising for our company as a company, not as a store, and we don't have a problem to recruit talents. We speak about us in the newspaper because our management is different. We spoke about us in LinkedIn and other media, and for us it's good also. So nothing is good. There is always a bad thing and great thing, and
but overall, I think, Sebastian, what you're describing there is, it's nearly like these new ways of operating in the world, creating a particular field, and there are more and more people who feel drawn with their own energy to want to be part of something like this that operates in a different way. Because I think at least when we're not completely dead inside, something goes in resonance there. And there's something quite amazing that we feel can happen in a field like that in terms of self-expression and meaning and contribution. Yeah. Theo, if you could start your video and your audio to us.
Yeah. I have a question for Joanna. And how do you deal with introverts in the pitching process? And is it a pitch in front of the whole team, or is it more in like a closer setting, one-on-one, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, it's a public setting. I mean, you know, the whole team is present. And I think we are dealing with it by being very explicit very often in the team of the differences we have. So we have an explicit discussion about, you know, who is more of an introvert, who is more, you know, the Rampensau, as we say in German, you know, who wants to, you know, be on the stage. So also in team meetings, you know, people, when we do a meta reflection after team meetings and when we look at the dynamics of the meeting, we would then also, you know, notice the fact maybe that's the usual suspects have, you know, had most of the say and that other people have been more quiet. And so there is a general awareness of, you know, who is part of the team. And in that way, people also are supporting. I mean, it's really a very supportive structure, I find. You know, people are also supporting people who are more introvert. And these people could also have coaching. So if they want, we also have Bettina Rollo, who went with us through the whole process. She's also available to one-to-one coaching. So if people find that they are not good at, you know, presenting themselves, they can also work on that if they want to. Or it is also something, you know, people will also say, God, you know, I really don't know how to do this. I'm really right now very scared. I mean, we have, you know, it's a very open and transparent culture like that. I mean, people are not afraid to say, oh, God, my heart is racing and I'm really, really anxious right now because I've now got to pitch in front of all of you. You know, that's part of who we are. And that has been like the company culture that is not, you know, is not creating what is she doing, you know, kind of stares, but that people accept that you, and I mean, Peter, you said that right now, you know, you said, I mean, I think what we learned to include much more of ourselves and not only our mental capacity, but really also listening and bringing into contact with each other, you know, the way we feel, the confusion, the numbness, but also, you know, our physical emotions that we say, God, you know, mine right now, you know, my gut is up here. That is part of, you know, the communication style.
Mm-hmm. Theo, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Theo. Yeah, and you know, by the way, everybody else, you can also turn on your cameras if you want to. You don't have to. Joanna, based on that, I have one follow-up question in terms of the range, because my assumption is, and maybe I'm wrong there, that making it a public process actually creates so a lower. The range gets more narrow between the highest earner and the lowest earner. Is that right, or am I seeing this wrong?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, you know, I think at betterplace in the whole company, we are quite conscious about, you know, that is completely crazy to have salaries, you know, multiple, I don't know what, 10 or 20 or whatever. So we try to do that in both our organizations, also in the functional, you know, the platform where salaries are negotiated with the, you know, with your superior, but you are right. So it does create for not such big differences, and it creates also very often. I mean, for example, now you know, it's always a challenge with the legal structure. We do need to have a CEO for the company, even though we don't really live that structure internally. And so we said, okay, how are we going to evaluate that if somebody really is taking the legal responsibility for the whole team? We feel that there should be, like, you know, some more money attached to that as well. But those are open discussions. But I would say that in general, you know, it is the gap between, you know, like the gap between an intern and, you know, the people in the senior is quite big, but it's not, you know, extraordinary. And there is transparency about this.
Mm-hmm. Great. Romani, did you come with a question, or did you just turn on your video because I asked you to?
Yes, I just wanted to come and show solidarity, but I didn't have a specific question.
Okay, great. Well, I think it's lovely to see a lovely face. Let me take one of the questions that was posted on YouTube, and Sebastian, I'm going to ask you that question. So what would be suggestions or ideas to actually start this kind of a process in organizations, to get more organizations, maybe even also of larger size, interested in this type of a process? Any thoughts you have on that?
Well, it's just my point of view. I don't have the variety. I think it's not the first subject to begin a transformation. It's a subject with all of other subjects. In Decathlon, I think that's the remuneration, the money. It's a subject who can accelerate in our development. It's not a goal to do money. It's another topics like management, like feedback, like recruitment, like it's a process, and the process, all our process can increase our conscience in the company, and but the money, it's a really complex topic. Yeah. And it takes time, and for me it's not the first to do. Yeah. But I think it's important to do. If you want to
so in summary, somebody has to start, right? You have to start somewhere, which is maybe not necessarily money as the first area for increasing collective consciousness and individual consciousness. Yeah. But at some point, I think money can be a fascinating accelerator into consciousness work as well, because it's so demanding on so many different levels.
Yeah, well, we take a lot of time to learn emotions, feelings, and to speak about it. And if I speak only with my head, the topic of money, it's so difficult. And
listen, everybody, I'm just looking at the time here, and I would like to make a few announcements before we close. We had another question on YouTube, which links the whole question of new pay to an unconditional basic income and what the connection there might be. I would like to pause that question for the next time, because we'll actually have another round of this type of conversation. I already know one of my guests for the next round for this topic is going to be Markus, who is, he has a crazy title. He works at Einhorn, which is a condom and female hygiene product company here in Berlin, who have also introduced this type of a model. So I'm very curious to hear about how they have gone about this, and I will find another guest for that conversation, and then we'll take the last questions into that. And I will post some links into the chat right now for anybody who wants to have a look at what Better Place Lab is up to. There's a link to this organization that Joana has kickstarted as a source at any rate, and which is now taking on its own life. For those of you who are interested in the next Money Talks, that will happen again on the topic we already had as well, because I do like the process of going deeper. So the next one will be again on money, new currencies, and blockchain. And sorry, the link is a bit mingled up there, so I could probably separate that out better. Peter, if I could ask you to give us sort of a 2-minute intro into the Money and Business Partnership Congress that is coming up, that would be great.
This is coming up in April. Nadia is working hard with me on it, and a team of 13 other people, and growing. And it's going to be primarily digital, because it's designed as a hybrid, but where we are planning it live in Austria is pretty locked down right now, but we're still hoping to get there, some of us, just to run it from there. And it's about creating love in business, actually, and have money move with love, rather than as the prime driver, rather than financial calculus. So it's very much in the theme of what we've been talking about here. My own so-called key performance indicator, KPI, for this is I call smiles per hour. So if you can count how often your people are smiling, I think you should pay them more the more they smile, authentically, of course.
Authentically, yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is the goal, part of what we're looking to create with this Congress, create love in business, I call it, as the driver. And on the other side, connect it with creating new monies, the future of money and new coins, new monies, new crypto coins, because the present system is still one that we're using, and actually we need to be grateful for what it's providing. But clearly, if it doesn't come to an end, we are actually, with our system, going extinct. So we have to be very aware of that. And we do need new systems, including a new money system, to be able to shift from where we are and where we're heading right now. So this Congress is launching a movement, if you like. We've launched a movement, which won't just be this Congress. This is just a start to bring these things together, the system of money and what we've been talking about largely here today, the inner work that's needed in order to understand and do something with a new system.
Wonderful. Yeah, so the pre-registration is open now. If you click on create love in business, create love in.business, then you will land at the website for that. And then the last final piece is that if you are interested in taking your own money consciousness to a different plane, join us for CU Money. I don't know when the next round is going to start, because I basically always collect people along the way, and when we're enough, I open the next program. So if you want to be part of that, have a look at the website that I posted as well. And now to conclude, I would just love to get a quick sort of last closing statement from both Sebastian and Joana. Just sort of, what are you walking away with after this conversation today? Joana, if I could ask you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that Decathlon Belgium is doing interesting stuff. And I'm also interested, yeah, I just find it very interesting the way how you are approaching it, making choice, you know, as such a centerpiece in your model, and letting people decide when they are ready to go, you know, the next step. So I think that is really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Joana. Sebastian.
For me, I learned today that money is a personal way of the company and of the teammates, and the way of Joana is different than the way of Decathlon, and for me it's always a beautiful story, and the way is the most important. Yeah.
Yeah, the way is the goal in a way.
Yeah.
Great. Peter, any last thoughts that you want to share before we close?
Thank you, Nadia. No, I'm just grateful for what you're doing and this wonderful hour and a half that we've had together. I think it's absolutely in the spirit of this work as it goes further. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So thank you.